You know, I think Tony can be credited with really bringing agaves as a real landscape feature to the southeast. I don't think it was really on many people's radar when he started collecting them. And as you can see, he's really gone overboard. And some of the stuff that I think he's going to be talking about in terms of where some of these newer ones are coming from is mind-blowing, really, what's being done and what Tony's really been helping push forward with his work at the nursery and also with other people around the world. So without further ado, please welcome Tony Avent.
Wasn't sure how many people were going to come out for agaves, so we didn't get quite our normal crowd, but I do appreciate those that come. I've been fascinated with agaves really as from the time I was a very young kid. We went on one of those National Lampoon vacations out to California driving, and it was quite an event, quite memorable, especially the parts when we stopped in the desert. And my father went out to rub tombstones, that was his thing, and I went out in the desert to collect plants. And I was fascinated by plants in the Southwest. I can't explain why, but something about cacti and agaves just really fascinated me. So, brought back a few pups and grew them for a few years. Wound up killing them because I didn't really know what I was doing. And then when I was in school at State, JC had planted several agaves here. He had nice agave perii, Sauvignon, a couple others. Kept watching those through cold winters like this is really amazing. These things are really growing well here. And then in '94, had the opportunity to travel with the Yucatán guys down to Mexico and spend several weeks down there looking at agaves in the wild, and that did it. There was no hope after that point. I think we all go through phases as plant collectors. I certainly have been through my phases, and agaves are now in probably their 30 years, so that's been a very long phase. The first ones we planted, again, all died. I learned several things about agaves. One, you better know where you get them from. It's not just what species works, it's where that species is located. So often as we see in native plants, one population may thrive, another population from another area may not. It may be a higher elevation, lower elevation, more moist conditions, etc. That combined with planting conditions. When I started growing agaves, I grew them all flat. And I killed them. Tried them again, and I killed them. And I pretty much for several years gave up. And then, I don't know, something I was reading, it talked about where agaves grew, and I noticed they always seem to grow on some sort of a slope. And then it's like, okay, drainage. Because where they grow in the wild, they're generally getting 10 to 12 inches of rain a year. We normally get around 45 inches a year, so quite a difference there. And on a hike out in Arizona one day, it just really hit me because I took a very long trail up in northern Arizona. Every single agave there was growing on a slope. None of them were growing flat. I mean, some slopes were moderate, some were very steep. And then when we began trying to mimic more of that, so everything did have good winter drainage, our success went up. So with anything, as a collector, I want more. It doesn't matter how many there are, you want more. If there's 6 species, you want 12. If there's 10, you want 20. With agaves, we've been able to determine there are 31 species of agaves that are winter hardy here if you get the right accession. But once you grow those, you want more. So we said, all right, how do we get more? What needs do we have to accomplish? To find more. Agaves are generally native from Utah, south, all the way into Mexico, and then down even into Guatemala. So we're more focused on the ones from North America, from the U.S., and then from the northern part of Mexico, generally Nuevo Leon, Tamaulipas. That's where we really get the best. Much south of that, we simply can't grow them. Okay, so where do we get these new ones? Number one, we discover new species. When I started at State, I assumed all species had been discovered. Boy, was I wrong. In the last decade, there have probably been over 20 new agave species discovered. It's pretty amazing. Here we are in 2016. Seedling selections of species. Every species has a set plasticity. It's what is the variability of that species. Some plants you can grow from seed, you can grow 100,000, they all look identical. Other plants, like agaves, you can grow 50 and they are radically different. So we've got that opportunity by just making selections of the species. Mutations, natural or induced. Agaves are genetically very unstable, just like the people that collect them. So we have a lot of opportunities, you'll see. Hybrids. Agaves do not behave the way botanists want them to behave. Botanists are people who sort of set the rules. Here's how nature is supposed to work. For example, if you went to a lot of schools, they teach a species is a plant that cannot cross with another plant. If the two cross, then they're all the same species. Agaves shoot down all the hell. Now, some people say, well, they can't cross because of natural barriers. No, doesn't work even with agaves. Now, the question then becomes, what is the natural barrier? We don't really know because our continents have all moved around, plants have migrated, and when it comes to agaves, the pre-Columbians, oh my God, did they screw up things. Those people, they moved plants everywhere. And agaves are so useful, the fibers, the drinks, everything that people make out of those, they are the reason people are still alive in a lot of Mexico, is agaves. So the pre-Columbians moved them everywhere. They moved them all up into North America, all up into the U.S., what is now the U.S., everywhere. And everywhere they moved one that they liked, it started hybridizing with something that was in the area. So they have actually what we call speciated. We now have new species being discovered that were created by the pre-Columbians bringing agaves around. So it's really a fascinating time. All right, let's just start. New species discoveries. One of my favorite was found back in the 70s. A plant explorer, Lynn Lowry of Texas, was prolific going into Mexico back when it was pretty easy to go into Mexico. And actually, it's still pretty easy to go back and forth into Mexico, I understand. But soon we'll have a fence. Mexico's going to pay for it, I understand. He brought this back, planted it all around Dallas where he lived, and people kept looking at it, and like, well, it's really a nice agave. What is that? And so Lynn passed away back in the early 80s, and everybody kept saying, what is this? Well, the agave doesn't offset, so there's really no way to propagate it. Finally, the agave flowered, and the neat thing about it, when this one flowers, and the flowers are all finished, at the top, it forms little baby plantlets, and it starts raining little agaves all over your head. I mean, hundreds of little agaves, almost 1,000 off a plant. So a friend of mine, Greg Starr out in Arizona, got hold of Lynn's papers and went back to Mexico, tracked this down, found the original population, and it turns out it's a brand new species, never discovered. And it turns out not only is it new, but it is the single best agave for our climate. So a really amazing, amazing discovery. This is agave ovatifolia, called the whale's tongue agave. This is another of the fairly recent ones. This is probably one of the oddest agaves ever. This is agave albopilosa, meaning white-tipped agave. Every single leaf on the agave has a piece of cotton glued to it. I mean, it's the darndest thing in the world. It's only native to one area, and it's native on completely stiff cliffs. And this is one we were very excited to finally get. And this was just discovered probably 12 to 14 years ago. Very, very difficult to access. So we've got that opportunity. Then, looking at seedling selections of those plants. This is the same one I showed earlier. If you grow this from seed, this is the original Lynn Lowry clone. The leaves are smooth as a baby's butt. They are just absolutely just slick. But this one is, the leaves are very, very rounded and not much in the way of spines on the side. This is a seedling of the very same thing. This is one that was named Fancy. Very same agave, and yet looks completely different. This one, the leaves are very ruffled, much less teeth, but much more deeply indented. This is one of our seedlings, same plant. This is one we named Flapjack. Again, very different, and yet we're looking at the same species. This is one of our seedlings, same species. This is one we named 50 Shades of Gray. Cause you a lot of pain if you don't behave. So all of these are, again, one species. So we found that with agaves, even though we may not have a lot of species, we can grow seedlings and make these incredible selections. So this is agave bracteosa. This is called the squid agave. And this is a very high elevation. We saw these at over 8,000 feet down in Mexico. This one has absolutely no spines at all. So this is the original collection, also by Lynn Lowry. This is growing in our garden. So again, grow this from seed, what do you get? A friend down in Texas discovered this one. This is called Calmar. It has virtually no offsets. So you see the last one, look how many offsets are on there. That's just offsets like crazy. This one is almost solitary. It will eventually form a few. We have the opportunity several times to go into some large wholesale nurseries out in Arizona where they grow these by the hundreds of thousands and just go through and make selections. This is one we pulled out that was dwarf. It only gets 3 inches tall and less than a foot across. We named it Squidget. This is sort of the squid agave. It's a really cute thing. And this is a giant one. This is one we named Octopussy. Each rosette is absolutely huge. I mean, it's just, we walked in the rows, and this one is just sticking out. It's like it's agave on steroids. So again, just looking at species variation. Agave lophantha, this is a very common one. We saw this a lot around in northern Mexico in Tamaulipas. This is actually a seedling from a plant that we found down there. So look at the variation. This is another one, same species, found on the same trip. This one actually, the leaves twist a little bit and much more deeply green. Same species. You get into one population, all the leaves are very wide and they have this beautiful stripe down the center. Exactly the same species and yet quite different. And then if you've looked up on the roof garden here, this is another one, same species. This is one called La Bufa Baby. This is another yucca collection. The leaves almost blue, which we typically never see in lophantha, but got the same central stripe. This is that agave albo pilosa that I showed you. In the wild, it is a solitary agave. It never offsets. We were able to get seed, and just look at the variation. Solitary, offsetting. This one, so these are all the same age. That one's already forming hairs. This one has none. So that's an early developer. There's another one. Lots of little offsets. So that's the kind of seedling variation, and that's where we get many of the new cultivars from. Is just throw lots of seed, grow them out, and you can pretty much start making selections at a fairly young age. All right, hybrids. 4 types: in situ, that happen in the wild with human intervention; ex situ, that happen in cultivation; and then intentional crossing. These are seeds of agave ovatifolia that we purchased that were collected in the wild. We grew those out. It's got a lot of green in it. Ovatifolia doesn't have any green in it. And then we started looking at the upturned tips, which ovatifolia doesn't have. So we know immediately this is crossed with another species in the wild called agave gentrii, which has the larger teeth, the red teeth, and has the little upturned tips. So out of that seed bag of probably 200 seedlings, we got actually 2 hybrids. That's the second one. That's also got agave gentrii in it. You can see just a little bit of the upturned tips there, but this has got probably 70-80% ovatifolia blood and only about 20-30% gentrii blood. But both are obvious hybrids. Agave victoriana is one as I was a kid, we all bought this as house plants. Had no idea the thing was winter hardy, if you get it from the right populations. This has a huge range in Mexico, and if you get it from down in further south, no chance. But this is actually in our garden, and this one is already spiking. So this is a hybrid from the wild, crossed with the one I just showed you, the squid agave, Agave bracteosa. So this is the parent of this was this. That was collected in the wild. So that's a really odd hybrid. Those are in very distant tribes, and there's no way those should be able to cross, but yet they do. This is agave, I believe this is Harvardiana, which is also a very good species here. Doesn't like our summer rain, so this one really needs to be protected a little bit. And that crosses in the wild with agave lechujulia. Lechujulia is one you see a lot if you go in Texas. And this is one the ranchers hate because it sort of sticks straight up and the cows stick on it and then the ranchers fall on it. It's just, they really hate this. It's a great landscape plant because it suckers and it fills very large areas. You go out in the desert and you'll see a 10 to 12 foot wide patch. Well, in the wild, the two of those cross and they come up with this. This is actually a wild collection by the late Howard Gentry. He's sort of the godfather of agaves. He wrote the Agave Bible. And at the Botanic Gardens in Phoenix, Arizona, they have many of his original collections that they were glad to share with us. So this is one that he actually documented having found in the wild between the two of those. This is Agave palmeri. This is one native to Arizona. Some forms grow okay here, some don't. Well, this is one of those that's really been invaded by the pre-Columbians, where they move stuff around. And this is the hybrid. This was named as a new species about 10 years ago. This is Agave javapensis, where they brought in something and planted them near the Agave palmeri, and they've now crossed, and what they brought in is now gone. It's died out or it's been subsumed by the hybrid, and this is the brand new hybrid. And it's a really amazing plant. So you can walk through certain areas where they have large encampments and find this brand new species. This is one of, I believe now 3 species that have been named that are called the pre-Columbian hybrids. Agave montana has always been a favorite. It's a very high elevation plant. I mean, over 9,400 feet elevation down in Mexico, but it's really hard to grow here because it just doesn't like our moisture. This one is one that just has to be kept extremely dry. It has the most incredible markings of almost any. The leaf bud imprints are just stunning. I'd grow that just in a container. Well, it grows nearby Agave gentry that I mentioned earlier. This is one that was named actually after Gentry died. It was named in honor of him. It has very, very deep teeth, a very rich green, and just extremely smooth. Both of these, very smooth. Well, in the wild, they cross. And this is the intermediate hybrid. There's still a lot of debate in the agave community. A lot of people don't believe they cross, but it's pretty obvious to us that when you've got 2 parents and you've got something that's completely intermediate that came from the wild, that's certainly a cross. Mm-hmm. One of my favorites, agave, used to be called Ferdinand Regis. The actual name now is Agave nicholsii. It's first cousin to Victoria Regina, and some people think it's the same, but it's not at all. It doesn't grow together. It doesn't. It's just a different plant. I think that's one of the most elegant. That also hybridizes quite a bit with this plant. This is Agave asperima, formerly called Agave scabra. Now, agave taxonomy is a mess because these things have been named since the 1800s, actually a couple before then. But in this case, the type specimen was not properly collected and properly documented, so the name that everybody knew it by, scabra, which means sandpapery, which I really like, and had less letters, is no good because he didn't document it. So it was documented by somebody else as Agave asperima, so that now is the new name. So the 2 of those cross, and this one, there's some beautiful specimens here in the Arboretum that are just stunning. And the way you can tell, it's the only hardy agave that has sandpapery leaves. All the other hardy ones are smooth. So anytime you feel an agave and on the top or the bottom, it's rough, you know it has this in its background. So the cross of the two are these. This is the last two, let me just back up. So this and this cross to give us these. And there's a lot of these in the trade. Now this just shows some of the variation between those. The most common is one we call shark skin shoes. Many of you may have seen that, and I'll show that a little bit later. This was a really interesting thing we pulled out of seed lot at the big wholesale nursery. This is out of agave striatum, which is a fairly easy one to grow. And it was obvious to us that half of this had got hold of an agave bracteosa, the squid agave, because the leaves are much flatter. It's just one of the oddest agaves that we've ever grown. Well, finally last year it bloomed, and the flowers were absolutely intermediate between the two parents that we thought it was. It was just an incredible plant. That's it in flower. Bracteosa is very different. It has white flowers, first of all, and just a much dense flower head than the panicled yellow ones that we normally grow. This is an interesting cross of Lophantha, which we showed earlier, and that Lechugelia that makes those big patches. This is one we love. We call this spine tingler. Just a very architectural plant, not very tall. We got our first one of these flowers last year. And this is an interesting cross that, again, found this in a garden in Denver. And it's a cross between Agave havardiana and the one we just showed, Lechugelia or Lechugelia lophantha. Now, this is what the flowers look like. This is Agave americana. This is the one that most everybody that goes to the beach knows. It's what you see all along the coast. If you try to bring it inland, it's going to die because it has no winter hardiness. These occur at the bottom of a mountain in Mexico, outside of Monterey. They occur at very low elevations. As you begin to climb the elevations, at the very top is the one I showed earlier, the agave scabra or asperima, the rough one. So the nights in Mexico, you know, it's cold and lonely there on the mountain. So they, over the years, got together. And about halfway up the mountain, you find their babies. These are halfway between the rough one and the smooth one with no hardiness. And these are called Agave proto-americana. These will grow here. So this is where we get the giant size. The lowland ones crossed with the highland ones. This is a very variable complex. You know, it can have 10% Americana and 90% Asperima or reverse, anything in between. This is one we named Blue Steel. This is another one we call Stormy Seas. This is the one that flowered last year, if you saw it, one we named Gray Gator. A huge plant, 12 feet across. I mean, it's just insanely huge. All of these are the very same hybrid. Now, when they bloom, we've got another opportunity to make intentional crosses. This is not something a sane person would do. Breeding plants is one thing. Climbing on a ladder on top of that is just absolute nuts. Now, fortunately, we have now got staff members still are in the age of no fear. So we bought this really big 21-foot ladder, and we can now get close enough to begin doing that. So here we are. This is our research horticulturist, Jeremy Smith, who's up at top. This is taken last year, getting the pollen. You have to fight off the bees, number one. The bees are insane up here because there's so much nectar, and the hummingbirds dive bombed him. I mean, it's like, you know, King Kong up there having to swat. You know, you're trying to cross with one hand and swatting the hummers away with the other. It's really a fascinating thing. This is the pollen. We will actually get the pollen, we will bring that down, and then take that to another agave, and then move the ladder. Some pollen we actually will refrigerate or freeze till we have something that's coming along later blooming. All pollinating is done just with a very simple brush. We get the pollen off here, take that, and then pop it on to the other anther. So here we are, pollinating an agave. The Interesting thing about agaves, the flower is receptive the day before the pollen on that flower releases. So we're able to start and pollinate so we don't get any selfing the day before. So we actually will go in and pull the anthers off before they're ripe, and those can actually be put in the refrigerator. We'll have good pollen release the following day. And again, that keeps us from having cells. We showed this earlier. This is the Lophanthus. I'm going to show you one of our hybrids now. We crossed that with this plant. This is a plant known as Agave salmiana ferox. This is also huge. This is in our garden, easily 5 feet tall, 8 to 9 feet across. So we thought, well, what would be interesting if we could cross the two of those? And these are the offspring from that cross, perfectly intermediate between the two parents. And I'm going to show you the variation of seedlings. This is one. There's a second one, very same cross. So we've got the bigger spines here. Love this. It's got that little upturned tips. I think that's very cool. This one, it picked up the yellow center stripe. It's got a little more of the Lophantha blood in it. That was a seedling out of the same cross that we didn't expect. In the wintertime, the foliage turns yellow. Very, very cool stuff. This cross was made in 2011. Seedlings were first grown out in 12. Our first one is blooming this year. That is 4 years. Typically for us, in cultivation, we can bloom them in 15 years. So to have one that will flower in 4 years is just absolutely insane. So hopefully this will be in bloom for spring open house in May. So we can't wait to see, now that we've got 2 species in that, what else we can add to that. Because I think we're going to have about 9 flower this year. Now this is a very interesting cross. I showed you earlier the Queen Victoria Regina, the really nice one. That flowered a couple of years ago, and we crossed that with that giant Proto-Americana. Very weird cross. You'd never have taken, and these are the offspring from that. So I really look forward to seeing what that'll do. We crossed this Lophantha with this weird plant. This is strayed. I mentioned that earlier. This is one of only 2 agaves that are not monocarpic, that do not die when they flower. All the rest of the agaves, they bloom, they die. 2 species. This one is one that does not. It just flowers and flowers and flowers each year. So very unusual. So by crossing those 2, this is what we came up with. So we picked up the yellow stripe out of the agave Lophantha, and we got the narrow leaves. So these have only been in the ground about 2 years now. So we don't know where they're going to go so far. They're looking solitary, but very, very interesting plant. And this is the winter coloration that the leaves pick up. All right, mutations. We talked about seed induced and natural. Again, as I mentioned, very genetically unstable, both in the wild and in cultivation. This is a form of agave gentrii discovered by our staff taxonomist. He was on a trip in Mexico and walking through a patch of agave gentrii and looked down, and there it is, in a little town of La Pena. So he was able to come back with a division of that and named it after the site. He called it La Pena Colada. This is Agave ovatifolia, found in the wild by a couple of friends of ours in California. Can you imagine walking up a mountainside in the remote nowhere of Mexico and walk up on that? Oh my God, it's incredible. So they took photos, they documented it, got GPS readings, went back, and they got so much grief for not bringing it back. They went back down a year later with a tissue culture specialist who went in and was able to come in and cut the bud out. Not the plant, just a teeny tiny bud. Brought it back, tissue cultured it. It did go in tissue culture. They went back a year or so later. The original plant had died because of the damage. So they tissue cultured it, grew some plants up, and then went back and took 3 of them and planted them back in the wild in the same location. So now this is going to be eventually available. This is going by the name of Orca, since it's a whale's tongue agave. We do have one. We've got the first one outside of California. But really neat story. That's how That's how horticulture and propagation is supposed to work, is to be able to not only find something, but share it and then return it to the wild. Mutations. This is that agave lofantha that we showed you earlier. This is a mutation we found in the nursery last year. It's got not only the weird banding, but it's got an extra set of banding. It mutated a third layer in the leaf. This is one we showed earlier. I don't know why I put that back. And that's what it was from, anyway. That is a mutation of that. So it went from there to there. Got those reversed. All right, forcing mutations from dormant buds. When agaves mutate, they generally mutate from one growing point. What we know about agaves is that they are very similar to hostas. As a matter of fact, they're first cousins to hostas. When they did the phylogeny, basically the family tree of the group, they found 4 plants that clustered together. It means they're kissing cousins. Agaves, hostas, manfredas, and tuberoses. All of those will cross with each other. So the potential is there for some really crazy stuff. Well, we know because we grow hostas that at the base of every single leaf is a bud waiting to grow. But most agaves are solitary. They don't offset. Some do, but the majority of them don't. In there is a hormone called auxins. And the auxins basically are the brain of the plant. And they're sending signals down to the buds that say, don't you dare grow. If you do, there's going to be consequences. So all those buds are sitting there. So when we find a mutation like this, what we have to do is cause that bud by this leaf, let's see if I can point there, to grow. If we do, we'll have the entire plant that looks like that. So, see, here's another mutation. On one side of it, I've got this brilliant yellow. This is at our place. And on the other side, I've got this dull chartreuse. So this is one now that we're trying to force these buds so we'll have one that's a much brighter yellow. So this is sort of what we would find in terms of a streaky agave. This is genetically unstable. This is all leaves have 3 layers. Layer 1, layer 2, layer 3. In monocots, which would be agaves, the center layer is the L2, the layer 2. And that's where we get the interesting colors from the offspring. So here's the bud. That's peeling back a leaf. Anyway, peeling back the leaf, that's the dormant bud that will never grow as long as those auxins are sending that signal down there, don't you dare grow. So what we want to do is destroy the auxin factory. So here we are. So this is one that we've done. I'll show you how it's done in a minute. That we've destroyed the auxins by going in and severing its spinal cord. So what we do is, if it's an agave, we take a knife and stick it right straight to the center of the plant and cut down through the roots. And then we do it just for good measure. We do it at a 90-degree angle and cut it again. So we have basically severed its spinal cord. It can no longer send the signals to the buds. And what happens? Those buds then begin to grow. So there's a little better idea. Cutting all the way down through it. It looks pretty dramatic. And once we do it, we just pot it right back up. And it just continues to grow, but it also begins those dormant buds to pop. The other option is beheading it. That's okay in plants. Here we went in and just cut the top out. And as long as the agave is young enough, this does not work on old plants, the new tissue will start regenerating, again, those dormant buds at the base of the leaves. So here, we've taken the entire top out, done what we call coring. And what's happening? You see the new buds starting to pop out here. So we can now take a plant like this that's streaked. Genetically, that is unstable. That will eventually settle out. It may take it, well, it may flower before it settles out, but if it lived long enough, it would eventually settle. But by cutting that, like this, we're able to create this. This is the stable form of what we just showed. And you get all kinds of variants when you cut. So I'm going to show you what came out of that plant right there. That came out of that also. So that's 2 new cultivars we've got. There's 3, all out of cut. Now here's a form of the same plant, Agave bracteosa, and what happened here was a ploiding mutation. So we can actually now go in and manually cause the chromosomes to double. And when we do that, it makes the leaves twice as thick and the edge twice as wide. So at the top, Monterey Frost, and this is our new one down here at the base with the double wide border. Much better plant. That one tends to burn a lot. This one doesn't burn at all because this is much thicker. Here's a close-up. All right, this is agave Montana. We showed this earlier. We sent this off to the tissue culture lab. They put it in the test tubes and they're chopping away at the thing, and they noticed a stripe. One little teeny stripe. And in the lab, you can go in and make really tiny cuts, and this is what they were able to produce for us. So we got to the point where we were actually able to send a plant to the lab and say, put a yellow edge on this, we'd like a white center. Because you just culture enough numbers, you're gonna get the genetic break in there. So it's almost like now we've created designer plants. It's really amazing. Same plant, just a different mutation out of the agave Montana. Again, this is agave multifoliferous. Look at mutations that occur. This particular one, this was found by our friend Greg Starr in Arizona. He gave it to us to do the cutting. He didn't have the nerves to go in and cut it. So we cut it for him. We've now isolated it with this nice yellow stripe. This is one that, I don't know the history of this. We bought this out of Holland, but an amazing plant, same species. All right, this is another great example. This is agave Mr. Ripples. You've got a beautiful one out here, out back of the building. This was found by the guys at Yucca-Do. It's a hybrid from the wild. We don't know what it is. This is something that somebody's mixed up years ago. So we sent that to the lab. We said, see what you can do with that. Well, sent it back to us. There's the same plant. Put an edge on it. Pretty darn nice. We're going to call this ripple effect. So what we did is grow it up, then we had to cut it, to core it, to get an offset to send to the lab. And then the lab now has this working in production. So a year or so from now, we'll be able to share that one, all because of this technique. That's agave ovatifolia. That's one that they created in the lab as well. Fascinating pattern because it's got this almost freckle pattern. I've never seen this in an agave anywhere. And because it's unstable, when we cut that, we were able to actually get this weird out. So the pattern is fascinating because we got the typical blue leaves there, and then we got the mutation here. So if we were to cut right there, we would get all solid blues, but we don't want it. We actually like this, again, genetically unstable plant. This is the same plant, same mutation. This reversed the pattern. This is the same agave ovatifolia done by the same friend of ours in the lab, now with a white center. Of course, it has less vigor, but a really neat container plant. Same species, agave ovatifolia. This is one we found as a mutation coming out of the labs. Got the blue with the wonderful center. Now here's a very interesting mutation. The plant at the top is agave parviflora. Parviflora, I don't know, years ago mutated to this beautiful silver center. Silver center has 2 layers in the L2. It has a green layer on top of the white layer. When we cut it, the top layer mutated off. That is a mutation from there with the layer of green stripped off. So all we see now is the layer of white in the center. So we got so many possibilities just by changing how the layers are presented in creating new agaves. This is a fascinating cross between a couple of winter hardy species, agave folifera, and I can't even remember the other species offhand. But this weird one mutated over in Holland where they found it. And this is one we named Shadow Dance. It's wild. That's a new growth, and it matures to this parchment color that doesn't burn. It's a crazy plant. And man, we put this thing in the lab, and it's just created all realms of just crazy stuff. So over the next 5 to 10 years, you're going to be seeing a lot of neat things coming out of that crawl. I mentioned earlier the hybrid between agave nicholsii and agave asperum. This is it. This is shark skin shoes. You will find this in the wild quite a bit where those two species overlap. And this is one of the nicer forms. Well, we sent that up to the lab. We said, see what you can do with that, but give us some kind of patterning on that. Well, sure enough, first thing they get is this, which is streaking. That's the very first thing. Then they begin cutting, and then we begin cutting. And look what's popping up back there. Got the green center. And before long, this is what we had. This is one we actually introduced this year. So mutation from that last one. We call it shark bite. And not just one mutation from that. That's also a mutation. Same pattern, green center, yellow edge, but look at the difference. Much wider edge. We got a yellow center. We got a brighter yellow center. All same mutation. Now here's a streaky one we were cutting because I found one white streak in it, absolutely one. And look what popped up after we cut it. We took that off there just today. Create your own agaves. It's really pretty cool, and it's actually pretty easy to do. So now we've had to recut this one and to have an extra one to send off to the lab. All kinds of odd mutations. This is one that when we sent it off to the lab got really screwed up. We're assuming this is what's called a gibberellin induced mutation where the gibberellins are missing, and it just shrinks to this weird thing that will never flower. And this just multiplies. There'll be 100 offsets in one little pot. We named this one Bed of Nails. So an agave perii, it should be hardy if you can keep it dry enough. And same thing here with the agave lophantha. We had that weird mutation to just give us this weird genetic dwarf that just multiplies like mad. Why did I mention cousins? Manfredas. Man, there's some wild stuff going on there. We didn't realize how wild till my friends at Yucca-Do were down one day, and they collected seed from a Manfreda. And they brought it back, and they grew these out, and I may have it later on, and realized that one of the seedlings was actually a hybrid between a Manfreda and an agave. That it actually happened in the wild, but the seed didn't germinate until we brought back to the U.S. So here's a Manfreda. This is our native one, native here in North Carolina, native into the Midwest, down to Florida, an amazing plant, Manfreda virginica. The difference is it's deciduous, whereas agaves are evergreen. This is one of my favorite. This is a Texas native, Manfreda maculosa. Love this. It's just beautiful spotting leaves, and the flowers are just incredible. Can you see the resemblance to tuberoses? Very, very similar. This is just an amazing plant here, and I'm just shocked everybody doesn't grow this species. It's just really great. This is Yucca-Do's wild collection from Mexico, Manfreda undulata. An amazing plant. This is one they named chocolate chips. One of the most stunning plants in our garden. It makes it 2 foot wide. The leaves are rubbery. There's no spines on a Manfreda, but a really amazing, amazing plant. What is a mangave? This is what I'm talking about. This is a name we made up. This has never been officially published, but it's a cross between a Manfreda and an agave. This is that original plant. My friend Carl Schoenfeld from Yucca grew out as a Manfreda. He grew out hundreds of seedlings. All of them look Manfreda-like except this. And he called me up. He said, you got to fly down here and look at this. This is wild. And we're sitting there looking at it, and we're thinking, what was nearby? And he said, there was agave nearby. There was agave celsi nearby. And we went, he had agave celsi bloom, and we went and looked at the flowers of each. Very similar. And it was obviously a hybrid. So then we put that in tissue culture, and not only did we reproduce it, we were able to put an edge on it. So that's the same plant you just looked at. If you grow it in more sun, the spots actually come back. And then that's the same plant with the patterns reversed. All due to the same thing, waiting for that one streak and then cutting the leaf. This is the second Manfreda to come. This one out of Japan. This is a hybrid of Manfreda and a little agave called Macro Acamp. This is a cute little potted plant. No hardiness here, but really cool genetics to breed with. So these are examples. These are some hybrids. This is a cross. These are all seedlings with Manfreda as the pod parent. So the seed set on Manfreda. So this one came up. That's straight Manfreda. That's the cross with agave. This is all out of the same pods or out of the same flower stalk. So you can see we get about 50% hybrids when we actually go in and make those crosses. And there's a little older. That's straight Manfreda. That's a hybrid with agave. You can tell the thickness of the leaf, the way the rosette forms. Manfredas are generally one leaf immediately. It's very, very obvious. These are some of our initial crosses. That giant one I showed you, the Agave Salmoniferax, we crossed with a running Manfreda. We got these weird things. I mean, fascinating genetically. They're not great garden plants, but at least we knew they could be done. There's another. So this was our really biggest one. This is a cross with Agave Perii. So that one is good outside here. So we got that beautiful blue rosette now with the stripes. We really called in one of our friends, Hans Hansen, a breeder with Walters Gardens, because he's just an incredible breeder, and he's got more greenhouse space than we do. And we began sending him a lot of these with the pollen, and he's really taken these to the next level. So this is sort of what he's working with now. He started with the stuff we sent, plus this one, which was in Holland as a Manfreda, which is obviously not. It's obviously a hybrid. It doesn't, it was sold as Manfreda guttata, but when you start looking at the original type specimens, it doesn't match at all. It's obviously a hybrid that was not great. And so along with that, he began doing some work. First thing he did is put an edge on that one. Throw it in the lab, slice it. That's one we introduced this year under the name Kaleidoscope. And these are some of his hybrids now. This is where they're going. This is one we introduced this year, Pineapple Express. This is another one introduced this year. It's just incredible where these are going now. This is one that's on trial in our garden. I showed you that agave avetifolia. This is it, crossed with Manfreda. This is after last winter, 7 degrees. Pretty incredible stuff, pretty exciting stuff. Where we're going with these, it's literally absolutely amazing. Look at the colors. It's just fascinating. Again, these are all outside. These are they'll get this big in 1 year. This is not slow like an agave. These things have speed like you cannot even imagine. And this is the first polyfreda. This is Polyanthes Manfreda. And this is just some work that was done years ago by Dr. John Lindstrom at the University of Arkansas, who passed away recently, very unfortunate. The new exciting stuff, I can't even show you yet. It's still very much under wraps, but if you can imagine the most incredible Polyanthes flowers on plants that look like agaves with soft foliage with this wonderful patterned leaves, it's absolutely amazing. It's an amazing time to be able to take one genera that most people probably did not even grow 10 to 20 years ago, and now all these incredible creations. It's really a neat time. Thank you. Glad to answer any questions should anyone have.
What are the theories about the instability of the genetics of this group?
It's not just the group, it's more than that. Hostas, the very same way. That's why we have so many variegated hostas. The genes are just very unstable. As plants have, the more complements of genes they have, the more chance something will go wrong. And in many things, like humans, when genes go bad, we call it cancer. It's a bad thing. But in plants, when genes go bad, we get really excited because it gives us a new plant that we didn't have.
So they have a high number of chromosomes?
Yeah. Just very high genetic numbers, and the higher the numbers, the better chance you're gonna have stability issues. So when we find in a lab, if we've got a couple hundred to 1,000 plants, we're gonna have a stripe in there. And that's why we can literally now say, we want an edge, we want a center on this plant. It's crazy that you can do that. It's just not something we thought of.
I hope this isn't a dumb question, but,
There are none.
yeah, right. So when you find one,
Mhm.
you send it to the lab, it's got the
Mhm.
stripe, it's beautiful, now it's in your catalog.
Mhm.
So to get the exact same thing, do you do all that in tissue culture, so it'll be the same?
We do it two ways. We do a lot of things in tissue culture, and in tissue culture, they are gonna be identical unless you have a mutation. So you can always have mutations, so the key in tissue culture is good roguing after it comes out. So we like having a few off types in the lab, because then that leads to something different. Now, things that we know, a lab is not gonna be able to do all the mutations we find. We find a lot that are just incredible. And getting a lab to do it, it needs to be something that not only we gonna benefit, but the lab benefits. So a typical lab is gonna want you to buy 10,000 of a plant to TC it. So we don't do those kind of numbers. If we sell a couple hundred, that's enough for us. So one of two things has to happen. The lab has to think that they can also sell it and make some money on it once we get it on the market. Or they have to owe us a lot of favors. So we share a lot of our genetics with people that have labs. And so when it's something very special, we only send the very special stuff to the lab. We'll say, all right, we need a favor here. I need 200 of these, or I need 500 of these. But by cutting, we can actually do these ourselves. It's a much longer process. But once we get up to say a dozen, and you cut and you get 15 off each, you're almost at your 200 number. But getting to that first 15 for things that offset, you start with one, you cut it, you get 10 to 15, then you gotta cut it again. So you've got, and the cutting process generally gonna take you a couple of years, depending on the plant. So it's not a fast thing. And I think, as I mentioned before, when we started doing these, the first variegated ones, it's really an interesting story. There was a very few collectors that would trade these. These were just rare as hen's teeth. And the prices were pretty extreme. And then I discovered eBay. And eBay is incredible for buying variegated agaves. Most of the really cool stuff comes out of Thailand. When we started researching and talking with collectors and tracking down, it turns out that all the stuff from Thailand came from one collector in Japan, very rich agave guy. He bought all this stuff from a guy in Southern California in the 1970s. It's now made it in 50 years all the way back into the US. And so we bought a lot of these online, had them shipped in, and you generally will buy a plant, if it's variegated and rare, about the size of your thumbnail with no roots, between $200 and $800. So it's not something for, if you're scared of rooting stuff, don't do it. I mean, there's popping up more people now in the US, but the really cool stuff came. And so we would buy this stuff in, then we had to get it tissue cultured. At the time, there were only 2 labs in the world that had ever done agaves. One was in Germany, one was in California. So we flew to the lab in California and we said, I've got all these variegated agaves now, I want you to tissue culture. She said, well, they won't come true. What do you mean they won't come true? No, you can't do them. I said, well, I don't understand this word can't. They're periclinal chimeras. Of course you can do them. We do hostas all day. They're no different. No, they won't do them. We've tried them. They absolutely won't do. So I'm flying back, and I thought, well, hell, I just call up our hosta guy in Minnesota and have him tissue culture. So I called him up, and I said, we have these spiny hostas. I need you to tissue culture. He put them in the lab, and a year later, we had them back, and they were absolutely perfect. So what we found out happened was there are 2 agaves, very popular variegated agaves, that are layered. just like I talked about with the one, they have a green layer over top of the variegated layer. That was one of the ones that they had tried. There are only 2 agaves that variegated that can't be tissue cultured, and they had tried one of them. And they leapt to the conclusion that none of them worked. And so they missed out on 15 years of an incredible market because they were in the box. Yeah. Yeah.
I have 2 questions. If you want one that grows fast, you go for the agave?
Yeah, if you want one that grows really fast, there's some agaves that grow really fast, depending on what you want. The large types like the Salmianas or the Proto-Americanas, they're pretty damn fast. But the Mangaves, they're all fast. I mean, this is just insane. You can put a little thing this big and it's filled out a pot in 6 weeks.
My whole question was, if they like being on slope,
Yeah.
how do you do container?
Containers, they're fine. They don't mind it. It's the slope is in the winter time. They can grow flat all day long in the summertime. It can rain on, they don't miss a beat. They will grow like mad. But in the winter when it's cold, that's what kills them. They absolutely cannot tolerate moisture. So if you've got them in a container, you need to bring them inside in the winter. I know some people that on the real hardy ones put them just under an eave and they're fine. But the tender ones, you certainly couldn't do that. You need to bring those in. But, yeah, it's just that winter wet. I was visiting years ago at Whitmore's garden up in other side of Asheville. She's a very well-known rock gardener, and she had agaves up, and this is solid zone 6. It's cold as a, you know what up there. She would go in and put 4 pieces of rebar around them and lay a piece of plexiglass over the top just to keep the winter rains off. Keep they fine. So it's the winter moisture that they hate. Another technique that we've used is we plant a large shrub on the north side. And what that does is that sucks all the water and it keeps that soil bone dry in the wintertime, and it doesn't interfere with the light. You still got the southern, eastern, western exposure light. Fantastic way to bring agaves through.
Are any of them shade tolerant?
Tolerant. Yes. Are they shade tolerant? They are tolerant. They will not grow particularly well. And you will also lose winter hardiness because the hardiness is determined by the amount of sugars they build up. The more sun they're in, the more sugars they produce, so as you get in shade, you do a less sugars, which is why the variegated ones are not really very winter hardy because they don't have as much sugars in the leaves. They're very interesting too when they get close to blooming size, the winter before they bloom. They migrate all the sugars from the outer leaves to the inner part because they're protecting that bud that's formed that you can't see, but it's in the womb. And you have a hard winter before they bloom, and every leaf on them will just burn to a crisp. But the center will stay green because all the sugars are there protecting the baby. And then this spring, that spike will start. It's really amazing to watch them move their sugars around. They also move them from the older leaves to the newer leaves. So after each winter, you'll see older leaves are dying off, and that's because the sugars continue to move up in the plant. Yes.
I think early on in your presentation, you mentioned 4 different types of plants that were somehow compatible. I thought
Yes.
you said something about hosta
Yes.
and agave. Those are compatible. You know, the one thing about a hosta that's so pleasant is that when it dies back in the fall, I can guarantee it's going to come back up in the spring, no matter how bad it is. Now, wouldn't it be nice if that was an agave that came up in the spring?
Stay tuned. There's some really interesting things. I was reading a new phylogeny yesterday. The DNA work they do, you might have mitochondrial DNA, you might have the RNA, you might have the chloroplast. They all do different things. And each one says something a little differently. And each result, so it's not everything's always going to be the same. The one I read yesterday, they've got hostas right beside yuccas. So we'll be doing some crosses this year to see what can happen with